Los Angeles International Airport buzzed with energy on a typical Friday afternoon. Passengers moved in every direction, announcements echoed overhead, forming a chaotic symphony of modern life. At Gate B12, where Atlantic Airlines Flight 788 was boarding for Chicago, a long line of travelers waited patiently. Among them stood Olivia Carter, a black woman in her early 50s, positioned in the priority lane. She wore a sleek black business suit, her hair neatly tied back, exuding professionalism and quiet confidence. Olivia had just wrapped up an important legal conference and was heading home for what she hoped would be a peaceful weekend. Not far away stood Margaret Whitmore, a white woman in her 60s, dressed in expensive designer clothes. Her face, heavily made up, displayed open displeasure. She kept glancing at her watch, sighing audibly, her eyes repeatedly landing on Olivia, full of contempt. In Margaret's mind, a black woman didn't belong in the same priority lane as her. Eventually, unable to restrain herself, Margaret approached the gate attendant, her voice a disturbing mix of sweetness and command. "Excuse me, miss. Why do I have to stand with people like that?" she said, nodding toward Olivia. "She's been staring at my luggage. She looks suspicious. I don't feel safe flying with her. I'm sure she used fake documents to get into business class. You should double-check." The young gate agent looked startled, caught off guard by the clear racism in Margaret's tone. She tried to explain that Olivia was a valid business class passenger, but Margaret wasn't interested. She raised her voice, drawing attention. The commotion attracted two airport police officers on patrol nearby, David Reynolds and Brian Cooper. David, the older of the two, had a worn face and a gaze laced with quiet bias. Brian, younger and more impulsive, approached with interest. Margaret, seeing the officers, acted like she'd been rescued. She turned toward them, her voice shifting into a dramatic plea laced with venom. "Oh, thank God you're here, that black woman over there." She pointed directly at Olivia. "She's been eyeing me and my luggage in a strange way. I honestly feel unsafe being near her. Please check her out. We can't let people like that board a plane." Using fear and prejudice to manipulate the situation, Margaret planted the seed of doubt, aiming to serve her own entitled interests. Influenced by their own internal biases, David and Brian almost immediately believed the rich white woman. They walked straight toward Olivia, their postures stiff, clearly trying to apply pressure. The crowd around them parted, curious and tense. "Ma'am," David said first, attempting to sound neutral but clearly accusatory, "we need you to step out of line. We'd like to speak with you privately." Olivia, surprised but composed, looked at the officers, then briefly glanced at Margaret, who stood nearby with her arms crossed and a smug smile. Olivia understood exactly what was happening. She calmly stepped out of line as requested. "What's this about, officers?" she asked, voice calm and unwavering. "We've received a complaint from another passenger," David said, essentially repeating Margaret's words, but with a tone that made it sound like an established fact. "You were reportedly behaving suspiciously and may pose a risk to the flight. We need to see your ID and boarding pass." Olivia opened her handbag slowly, producing her driver's license and business class ticket. "These are my documents, completely valid," she said. "But I would like to know exactly what suspicious behavior I've been accused of, and who made this complaint. I was simply standing in line like everyone else." Brian, more impatient and aggressive, cut in immediately. "Why all the questions? When the police ask, you comply. Your attitude is raising more red flags." David examined her documents, eyes lingering on her name and photo, then scanned her outfit and designer bag with thinly veiled suspicion. "Olivia Carter," he muttered. "Business class?" He smirked. "And how does someone like you get a ticket like this?" He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. "What do you do for a living? Are you sure this ticket is yours?" The blatant insult made Olivia's blood rush to her face, but she maintained her composure. "You are addressing me based on personal bias and the false accusations of another, not on any factual evidence. My seat class and my profession are not relevant, nor are they within your legal purview," she replied. She looked directly at the two officers, eyes steady and firm. "I am a lawful citizen of the United States. I have the right to be treated with respect and without discrimination. The way you're questioning me, your tone, your assumptions, constitutes a violation of civil rights and professional ethics." She held out her hand. Now, please return my documents, and I'd like your names and badge numbers. The moment hung like a thunderclap. The arrogance in the officer's eyes flickered. The crowd around them held its breath. Brian clenched his fists, face turning red. What the hell did you just say? Talking back to the police now? Who do you think you are, giving us orders? David stepped closer, eyes narrowed. Listen carefully, black woman. Here, we are the law. If you want to get on that plane, you better learn your place. Otherwise, I'll personally escort you straight to holding. Their voices rose, no longer hiding their racial hostility. Crude insults about her race, her status, her gender came flying out in the middle of a public terminal like knives slashing at her dignity. The gate agent rushed over, flustered. Officers, she's a confirmed passenger. I've already checked. Back off, David barked, pushing the agent aside. This doesn't concern you. Margaret stood nearby, arms crossed, lips curled into a triumphant grin. In her mind, Olivia had been put back in her place. But Olivia didn't flinch. Her jaw tightened. You've crossed a line. Every word, every action, every abuse of power today, there will be consequences. I promise you that. David sneered. Consequences? Who do you think you are? Then he barked, cuff her. She's being disorderly, resisting police instructions and threatening flight safety. Brian didn't hesitate. He grabbed Olivia's arm. She flinched, instinctively pulling back but not resisting. Let go of me. You have no right. Shut up, Brian growled, yanking her arm forcefully. The cold click of handcuffs echoed through the terminal as he locked them around her wrists. A middle-aged black woman, handcuffed in front of hundreds of travelers. Her eyes closed briefly, not out of fear, but to contain a storm of humiliation, righteous fury, and growing resolve. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some pulled out their phones to record. Others covered their mouths in shock. Some turned away, ashamed of the society they were witnessing, but no one stepped in, at least not yet. Brian shoved Olivia forward. You're not going to the gate anymore. You're going straight to airport security holding. Olivia walked step by step down the crowded hallway of LAX, escorted like a criminal. Her back remained straight, her stride unwavering, but the handcuffs dug deep red welts into her wrists. The eyes of onlookers, curious, pitying, suspicious, or silently complicit, felt like 100 knives carving into her dignity. Yet Olivia held her head high. She memorized each face, each detail, like a seasoned attorney surveying a crime scene. In a far corner, a young black boy watched her, clutching his mother's coat. The woman pulled him close and whispered, "Don't look, baby. Because it's those who witness injustice who will grow up to dismantle it." Olivia was led into the airport police station as the noise of the terminal faded into a heavy, suffocating silence. But it was precisely in this place, where they thought she was most powerless, that the truth would begin to surface. They thought she was just another silent victim, that she'd bow her head in shame. But in just a few minutes, the entire power structure of this airport would be shaken to its core. Inside the airport precinct, a cold, square room with a metal desk and gray fluorescent lighting, Olivia was brought in like a suspect. Brian shoved her into a chair across from the duty officer, her wrists still bound, deep red marks exposed. "Book her," Brian ordered. The desk officer, a young black cop named Jay Wilson, flipped open his intake log, typing quickly. "Name? Olivia Carter," she answered calmly. "Age? 49. Current address?" Olivia recited it clearly. "Reason for arrest?" Wilson turned to Brian. "Disorderly conduct, failure to cooperate, threatening flight safety," Brian snapped. Olivia laughed, for the first time since the cuffs were slapped on. Her voice was soft, but sharp as a blade. "I'm a threat to flight safety because I objected to being racially profiled?" Wilson glanced at her, then at the officers. Something didn't sit right. This woman did not look like a public threat. "Occupation?" he asked. Olivia raised her head, her eyes steady, her tone as firm as if delivering a statement on the witness stand. "I'm a United States Circuit Court judge, 9th Circuit Court of Appeals." The silence detonated like a bomb. Wilson froze, fingers hovering above the keyboard. "I'm sorry. Did you just say?" "Federal judge," Olivia repeated. "Appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. I suggest you call your supervisor." David and Brian turned to stone, eyes wide. Blood drained from their faces, speechless. Olivia gently rotated her wrists, the handcuffs clinking like chains in the cold room. I demand to be released, immediately. Wilson scrambled for the key, hands trembling. As he unlocked the cuffs, he stammered, I'm so sorry, Your Honor. I didn't know. It's not you, Olivia replied evenly. It's them. She looked to David and Brian, now frozen, shell-shocked statues of regret and disbelief. David took a step back, mumbling, We didn't know if we had known. Then what? Olivia interrupted. You wouldn't have profiled me if I had a title. But what if I were a teacher, a doctor, a mother? Must I hold status to be treated as human? Brian whimpered, his voice cracking. I have a family. Please, I'm begging you. Olivia's gaze hardened, cold and heavy. You handcuffed a federal judge in front of hundreds of witnesses, based solely on an unverified accusation from a white woman. No subpoena, no warning, no due process, just bias, just abuse of power. Her voice now struck like a gavel slamming on the bench. You will be held accountable. Before the law, before the public, and before your own conscience. In the moment they believed they held all the power, truth was revealed, and not only did it flip the scales, it shattered the very system they relied on. Olivia didn't need to shout. She didn't need to fight. Her power came from poise, intellect, and clarity, enough to silence a room with her presence. The entire airport was now in shock. But the phone calls that followed would spark an earthquake no one could stop. Because this time, they arrested the wrong person, and no amount of damage control could undo it. Within 10 minutes of confirming federal judge Olivia Carter, everything changed. First came the urgent voice over the dispatch line. The director of airport security is en route, and the chief deputy U.S. Marshal. Then came the wave of arrivals. 3 senior officials from the Department of Justice, 2 investigative journalists already smelling a firestorm, and the Emergency Security Task Force. The booking room, once the scene of Olivia's handcuffing, now became ground zero of a growing scandal. Airport Security Director Howard Greer, gray-haired and pale, entered the room, removing his cap as he approached Olivia. He bowed deeply. Judge Carter, on behalf of the entire airport security system, I offer my deepest apologies. This is a systemic failure, an inexcusable mistake. Olivia didn't respond right away. She stared at him for a beat, long enough to strip him bare under her gaze. A systemic failure, she repeated slowly. Then how many people like me has this system wrongly detained, whose names you'll never know? Greer was speechless. At that moment, a staff attorney from the Ninth Circuit approached. She held a printed report extracted from security footage and body cam data from David and Brian. We have clear evidence of misconduct, racial bias, and improper arrest procedure, she said, her voice steel. We recommend the immediate suspension of Officers Riley and Baxter. David nearly collapsed. His lips quivered. Brian had already sunk into a chair, head in hands. But the final blow hadn't landed yet. A reporter from Justice Watch lifted his phone, speaking directly to Olivia. Your Honor, do you wish to address the public? The video of you in handcuffs is going viral. We're seeing millions of views in under 30 minutes. Olivia turned toward the lens. No hesitation, no theatrics. She simply said, this isn't rare. But today, they arrested the last person they should have touched. That line, delivered like a verdict, set off a national firestorm. The story was no longer personal. Once the truth came out, it became a symbol for everyone who had ever been humiliated because of their skin, questioned because they didn't look like someone with power. Olivia Carter wasn't seeking revenge. She was triggering an awakening. And that is true power. While the 2 officers were suspended, another name entered emergency review. Abigail Prescott, the woman who ignited it all with a brazen lie. But what she didn't know was that footage from the body cams and security cameras would soon make her the central character in a story she couldn't escape. As the legal system surrounding Olivia Carter entered crisis mode, one person remained unaware, completely oblivious to the tidal wave heading her way. Abigail Prescott. Her flight had just landed in Chicago. She walked out confidently, face smug, posture proud, as though she'd just won an elite game of social chess. No one would have guessed that just hours earlier she had stood in the middle of an airport, fabricating a story, weaponizing fear, manipulating law enforcement against a black woman. But waiting at the arrivals gate were 2 men in black suits, badges flashing Federal Civil Rights Division. They approached her with polite but airtight professionalism. Mrs. Gazy, Abigail Prescott? We're with the Federal Civil Rights Division. We need you to come with us for questioning in relation to a serious incident. You have the right to remain silent." For the first time in years, Abigail's lips trembled. She had never been interrogated, never had her privilege so much as questioned. But now, these federal agents held body cam footage, where her voice rang out clearly. "Look at her. She doesn't belong here. She probably faked that ticket." At the Federal Security Office in Chicago, the interrogation began. "You confirm that you called over 2 airport officers and said Miss Carter looked suspicious, correct?" Abigail tried to salvage herself. "At the time, I felt threatened. I was just reporting what I felt was unsafe." An investigator placed printed screenshots from the video on the table. "You said, 'I don't want to fly with people like that.' Do you understand what that phrase in that context means, Mrs. Prescott?" She didn't respond, just swallowed hard. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the phone rang hot in the Justice Department. "From the director of the Ninth Circuit Court, we are formally requesting that Abigail Prescott be prosecuted for providing false information to law enforcement, resulting in a civil rights violation against a federal judge. This constitutes a potentially criminal act." Abigail was detained for deeper investigation. This was no longer routine questioning. Her initial charge, knowingly making false statements with the intent to discriminate, a crime punishable by prison time and civil liability. When this leaked to the press, social media exploded. At the Justice Department's press conference, a spokeswoman declared, "No one, be it a private citizen or a self-styled social elite, has the right to weaponize falsehoods based on race or origin. We are reviewing this incident as a case of racially motivated instigation that led to unlawful arrest." When national news replayed the clip of Abigail pointing and yelling, many viewers murmured, "I've seen this happen, but no one ever got punished. This time, justice is actually speaking up." Abigail Prescott wasn't just exposed, she became the face of elite racism, sophisticated, privileged, and deeply toxic. But the truth, no matter how hidden behind diamonds or legacy, will always rise when the system is strong enough to protect the right people. As Abigail began facing consequences, a larger question loomed. How would Olivia Carter, handcuffed in public just 24 hours ago, respond? Would she file charges or choose a path even more powerful? The very next morning, at the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, an unexpected press conference was announced. No one anticipated that, less than a day after being wrongfully detained, Judge Olivia Carter would step in front of cameras, not as a victim, but as a force of reckoning. She stepped onto the podium, wrists still faintly red from steel cuffs, but her eyes, sharp and calm, silenced the entire room. "Yesterday," she began, "I was not attacked because of my actions or my words. I was attacked because I exist in a skin, in a body, and in a position that some people believe doesn't belong." The press held its breath. "I'm not here to complain. I'm here to declare. Starting today, my office will work with the Department of Justice and civil rights organizations to launch a new initiative, Operation Equal Gate." She paused. "We will audit every complaint handling protocol. We will investigate discriminatory behavior at every major airport in the United States. No more random checks that only happen to passengers of color. No more false safety concerns without evidence." The press room exploded. The hashtags #EqualGate and "I Stand with Judge Carter" trended instantly. News networks called it the most powerful counterstrike for justice in modern travel history. That same day, airports from JFK to LAX received orders to review and overhaul complaint protocols. No one expected that the woman handcuffed in public would be the one to ignite a system-wide reform. Meanwhile, at a crisis meeting inside the airport police HQ, commanders reviewed the body cam footage. Their faces turned white as they watched how Riley and Baxter had wielded power like a weapon of prejudice. They knew the system could no longer hide. Change had arrived, and this time no one was above it. Several days later, Olivia Carter was invited to speak at a special U.S. Senate hearing on airport security reform and law enforcement accountability. A senior senator said bluntly, "You turned a personal injustice into a national turning point." Not many people can do that. Even fewer have the courage to do it while still in pain. Olivia Carter was no longer just a judge. She had become a symbol for those who refused to be victims and instead turned injustice into the catalyst for change. From personal pain, she rewrote a national initiative, not with tears, but with action. Yet amid the quake she'd caused, two names remained unjudged in court: Dave Riley and Sean Baxter. Would their apologies still matter? Or would justice arrive silently, in the form of irreversible consequences? 1 week after the airport incident, a closed internal hearing was held at the Department of Justice headquarters. On the large screen were surveillance footage excerpts. Undeniable. Riley smirking as he asked Olivia, "How does someone like you get a business class ticket?" Baxter's face burning with rage when asked to state his name and badge number. Across the table sat two former officers, now in wrinkled white shirts, looking hollowed out by the weight of their own words and actions. Olivia Carter was not present. She didn't need to be. The evidence had already spoken. A DOJ attorney rose and spoke with solemn clarity. "We find the actions of Mr. Riley and Mr. Baxter to be a clear abuse of power, driven by racial bias. There was no threat to security, no resistance, just a black woman, accomplished, who dared to hold her head high and was punished for it." The room fell silent. An investigator entered and placed thick files in front of the two men: resignation forms, federal prosecution referrals, and FBI case transfers. Riley swallowed hard. He tried to lift his eyes toward a live stream camera, perhaps as if addressing Olivia directly. I didn't know who she was. If I had known, I would have never," the attorney interrupted. "And if she wasn't someone, if she was just a teacher, a mother, a regular citizen with no title, would you still think it was right to cuff her in public?" Baxter, the younger of the two, bowed his head, silent. There were tears in his eyes, but no one offered comfort. No one had forgotten what happened. A female investigator spoke gently, but each word landed like thunder. "The terrifying part isn't that you didn't know who she was, it's that you never thought it mattered." The internal verdict was delivered. Riley and Baxter were permanently stripped of all civil service privileges. Their case was referred to federal prosecution. Their violations were added to a national misconduct registry, accessible by all police departments. Shortly after, the Department of Justice confirmed both men would face federal charges under 18 U.S.C. Taggart 242, violation of civil rights under color of law. Meanwhile, global social media exploded. The hashtag Justice for Olivia topped U.S. Twitter for 48 hours. A user from Ghana wrote, "I'm a black attorney. I recognize the look in her eyes." A user from Japan said, "Justice has no borders. Our silence is complicity." A journalist from France tweeted, "This will end up in law school textbooks about systemic racism." This wasn't just two men paying the price. It was a message to every law enforcement institution. No one stands above the line of justice, not even those who wear its badge. But one final piece remained unexamined: the woman who sowed the poison, Abigail Prescott. Now that the world had turned its back on her, would an apology even mean anything? Or would her silence become her final damning sentence? In her stately home in Westmont's upper-class district, Abigail Prescott sat frozen in front of her laptop. The news was everywhere. The video showing her pointing at Olivia Carter, eyes blazing, her accusations dripping with racial undertones. "That woman, she looks suspicious. She's been staring at my bag. I don't feel safe." That sentence had now been shared millions of times. The media branded her the false witness of Gate B12. Once a respected guest speaker at charity galas on public safety, Abigail was now too afraid to leave her home. Her daughter called from New York in tears, asking, "Mom, is that you in the video?" Her husband, a senior financial consultant, was suspended from work. Their family shares in an investment firm were dumped overnight. Red graffiti reading "Justice Lives Here" was sprayed across their front door. Abigail lawyered up. She hoped to diffuse the outrage with a controlled apology. But Olivia's legal team gave a single unwavering reply: "My client does not require an apology. Mrs. Prescott must face legal consequences." And those consequences came faster than expected. The FBI confirmed Abigail Prescott as a false witness, whose actions triggered a federal civil rights violation. She was summoned for investigation on charges of providing false information to law enforcement, inciting racial prejudice, leading to unlawful arrest, facing possible criminal charges under 18 U.S.C. 1001, false statements. Abigail pleaded, I just I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't mean harm. I didn't know who she was. An investigator answered coldly, you didn't need to know who she was. All you needed to remember is, every citizen is equal under the law, and you forgot that. Faced with a choice between federal trial or plea agreement, Abigail accepted a deal, a fine of $250,000, a mandatory recorded public apology, a 10-year ban from serving on any community board mum. But when the cameras rolled, there was no arrogance left. Her face, lined and worn from sleepless nights, eyes sunken with shame, she said, I apologize for my baseless words that caused severe consequences to a highly respected woman. I was wrong, and I will live with this disgrace. The apology video was posted on the official channel of the Department of Justice. The internet wasn't moved. In fact, some reactions were even harsher. An apology doesn't erase the handcuffs on an innocent woman. If she hadn't been caught on camera, would she even feel remorse? This punishment is still far too light. The story of Abigail Prescott reveals a deeper truth. Racism doesn't always come from violence. It can stem from a look, a word, an attitude. And when you use your racial privilege to step on others, the reckoning will come, sooner or later. When things began to settle, many assumed Olivia Carter would retreat, avoid the spotlight. They were wrong. She had a plan, not for revenge, but for rebuilding a system that had rotted from the inside out. And a declaration was coming, one that would shake the foundation of American law enforcement. The next morning, headlines exploded across national news outlets. Federal Judge Olivia Carter announces launch of the U.S. Civil Rights Review Council. This wasn't a typical policy move. It was a seismic strike at the invisible layers of discrimination embedded deep within the very institutions meant to uphold justice. Standing before the press outside the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, Olivia Carter walked out, no bodyguards, no escorts. Her calm authority made even the clicking of cameras seem to quiet in respect. She spoke slowly, deliberately. I won't answer with tears. I don't need pity. I need change. We live in a system where a black woman can be arrested just for standing in the place she belongs. That ends today. The U.S. Civil Rights Review Council will be granted the power to conduct independent reviews of racial discrimination complaints in law enforcement, mandate anti-bias training across police departments, require full disclosure of arrest data by race, gender, and age, file federal civil suits against any agency violating civil rights. At Gate B12, where she had once been handcuffed in front of hundreds, a quiet gathering took place. Not for mourning, but to mark a beginning. A brass plaque was placed on the ground. It read, "This is where silence was broken. May courage echo louder." Across social media, millions shared images and videos with hashtags, I am Olivia, boarding with dignity, justice from Gate B12. People around the world posted stories of being profiled, questioned, dismissed, simply because they didn't look like the default. One person wrote, I'm not a federal judge. I'm just an Asian American nurse who's been stopped 5 times at security this year. But because of her, I know I have the right to speak up. Young people, especially women of color, began to see Olivia Carter as a new kind of icon. Not just a survivor of injustice, but a woman who faced down the system, not with rage, but with law, with clarity, with power. A law student from Howard University said, she made me want to rise up, not to pound the table, but to write the laws. In the final scene of the video, Olivia Carter returns to the airport, this time, not to board a plane, but to observe a new training session. Unbiased law enforcement in transit, mandatory for all federal airport security staff. A young female officer asked, where should we start, ma'am? Olivia smiled softly. Start with the eyes. Start with how you look at someone different from you, and decide whether they're a threat or just a citizen. No one can erase injustice overnight. But when one woman is publicly humiliated, yet rises up and turns that pain into policy, the system must change. If you've ever felt invisible because of your skin color, your gender, your background, this story is for you. Tell us which country you're watching from. And if you believe justice has no color, share this video so that the voice of fairness won't stop at Gate B12. If you've made it this far, you've probably felt what millions already have. Outrage at injustice, admiration for resilience, and a deep desire to see a better world. The story of Olivia Carter is not just about a black woman wrongfully arrested in an airport. It's about anyone who's ever been questioned just because they didn't look the part. It's about those who were locked in silence until they chose to turn silence into speech. This wasn't just a wrongful arrest. It was an intellectual and legal counterstrike, starting with handcuffs and ending with a National Oversight Council. And the best part? This story isn't over. Tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever faced what Olivia did? Share your story in the comments, because when you tell your truth, you empower someone else. If you believe human dignity should never be questioned at any boarding gate, share this video. Click like, subscribe, and join our community of those who will not stay silent when justice is silenced. This is Aiva Stories. We tell the stories that need to be heard. Because when we tell the truth, we change the world. See you in the next video.